In Godzilla Kong: The New Empire, we witnessed Godzilla's latest evolutionary state. But will the G-Man be able to grow past this? Will he devolve? Will he ever return to his blue state? And most importantly, can he get even more powerful? Today on Goji Center, we'll delve into the evolution of the King of the Monsters, understanding the how and why he had to shift to the next stage of evolution, bringing forth the strongest Titanus Gojira of all time. Subscribe to not miss any more episodes breaking down the G-Man and other epic titans. Coming up, the evolution of Titanus Gojira explained. In this episode, we'll cover all of Godzilla's different forms, beginning when we saw him in live action in Apple TV's Monarch: Legacy of Monsters. Here, we are taken back in time, prior to the events that happened in 2014, back to the year 1954 in Bikini Atoll during the Castle Bravo nuclear tests. These so-called tests were actually a way to lure Godzilla into a trap. What was supposed to be the end of the last surviving Gojira specimen would actually mark the beginning of Godzilla's outstanding evolutionary journey. Here, Godzilla seems very lean, almost young, and nowhere near as bulky as his later appearances. Additionally, we see that his dorsal plates are straighter, pointy, and jagged in appearance. It's unclear how tall he was during this time period, but he was likely around the 354-foot range, similar to his height in 2014. Before we move ahead to this era, we must first ask the question, was Godzilla always this skinny prior to this moment? Was he always this lean in appearance in the millions of years he's been roaming the planet? Well, probably not. If there's something we do know about the G-Man, is that he's been around not only for a very long time, but during many global crises and Titan Wars. That's right, a Godzilla like this would have probably not fared too well against other Titans like Ghidorah or a whole army of great apes. Evidence to support the theory that Godzilla was likely a bit bulkier is the depictions of ancient cave paintings showing Godzilla himself going up against other kaijus like a great ape and Ghidorah. Note how in these depictions, Godzilla isn't the skinny lizard we see in 1954. He's a bit more nourished, to say the least. So, what happened? Just like a bodybuilder who takes a year off from working out, or a bear who wakes up after hibernation, there are definitely some consequences of being inactive for a long time. These repercussions come in the form of lost body mass. Maybe he wasn't as tall back then, but likely more bulky. But not enough to take on a certain member of the great ape species. Yeah, if you didn't know, there's actually a record of a hard L handed to Godzilla by this fella. Known as the Rival, this dude was actually strong enough to kick Godzilla out of his house, suggesting that at this point in time, the G-Man wasn't 2024 big, but probably similar to something like 2014. It's no wonder that Godzilla, during the Great Titan War, resorted to using geological means to deal with these apes. In GXK, we learned that instead of taking on Scar King and his army of apes in hand-to-hand combat, he instead simply trapped them in a giant cave, leaving them at the mercy of Shimo. This ended up backfiring, but the point is that Godzilla was nowhere near as big and strong as he was during the years 2015 and beyond. But after these events and a long nap, Godzilla probably woke up around 1954 a lot skinnier. This nuke would only end up helping Godzilla get stronger, bringing us to the year 2014. At this point, after 60 years, Godzilla would have gained a little more mass, but barely any height. His spines, which are a key indicator of his maturity, were still more or less the same as his form in 1954. The real change between this form and the previous was the amount of mass he carried around. How is it possible that this Titan was able to bulk up? Radiation. At this point, it's really important to note that radiation is everything for Gojiras, with the lack of it only spelling death to those unfortunate to be deprived from it, as was the case with Dagon, another Gojira specimen with similar proportions to Godzilla in 2014, but lost a fight against the Muto Prime and served as an incubator for the two Mutos seen in 2014. Godzilla would now have the acquired mass necessary to avenge his relative thanks to the atomic bomb. This was a brave new world Godzilla was living in now. Radiation was now easier to acquire and recharging times were exponentially less than before. Instead of taking a nap that could last years next to a radioactive source, Godzilla would just rely on staying near or consuming the energy from any nuclear source. Here, Godzilla was able to take on two Mutos and tank a great amount of damage before defeating destroying them. But at what point would Godzilla end up switching up to the form we see him in King of the Monsters? Well, shortly after the events of 2014, or known as G-Day, Godzilla ended up having a confrontation with the Muto Prime, aka the parent of these two Mutos. After a few skirmishes, their last confrontation ended up costing the G-Man his dorsal plates, shattered by the Muto's sonic roar. Fortunately though, Godzilla was able to grow these back, but they returned looking different. Godzilla had leveled up to the next stage in his evolution. That's right, the next evolutionary stage featured a new shape for his dorsal plates. This shape, though, was not exclusive to this Godzilla. This shape marked the next stage in Gojira evolution. We know this because there was another Gojira that also reached these stages. One killed by the great apes and whose dorsal plates were used to create the axes in Kong's throne room. This is our indicator that there were in fact more Gojiras that reached this evolutionary stage back in the day, and Godzilla had just entered this stage. Shortly after, he retreated to Algeria in the Sahara Desert, where the G-Man buried himself for a nap. Here is where Godzilla was able to grow his plates back to this new form. But not only that, begin another growth spurt. We'll see how tall Godzilla ended up growing up in 2019, but first we must note that at this rate, Godzilla was already beginning to regain mass again. His more muscular arms capable of quickly dispatching titans such as the Ion Dragon, and even though becoming heavier, the G-Man was now able to move faster, his attack maneuvers covering more area in less time, preparing him for what is to come in 2019. At this point in time, Monarch had finally caught up a little bit with the realization that there were a lot more titans around the world laying dormant, and that Godzilla and Kong weren't the only ones around. One in particular, known as Monster Zero, was the one to look out for. Fortunately, at this point, Godzilla had reached the peak of his next growth spurt, reaching 393 feet in height and gaining more body mass, enough to once again fight titans like Ghidorah. Except this time, Godzilla had unlocked a new evolutionary boundary and was now taller. In Godzilla King of the Monsters, during a battle in the coast off Isla de Mara, Godzilla and Ghidorah were both caught up by a new man-made weapon known as the Oxygen Destroyer, which ended up greatly weakening Godzilla, almost killing him. Weakened and wounded, Godzilla retreated to the bottom of the sea in a lair he used to call home. Here, the levels of radiation were high, ideal for a very long nap. The problem, though, was that on the top, it would only be a matter of days before Ghidorah completely wiped out life on the surface, and humanity did not have much time. So in response, a team was dispatched to blow a nuke in front of Godzilla to jumpstart him again. After a heroic sacrifice by Serizawa to detonate the nuke right in front of Godzilla's face, Godzilla was quickly able to recover, and this operation ended up working a little too well. From here on out, Godzilla would have probably breached levels previously unknown to his kind. Thanks to modern-day nuclear breakthroughs and his ability to harness radiation, Godzilla's body nearly reached an equivalent of a nuclear meltdown. We hear this all the time, but what does this actually mean? A nuclear meltdown, by definition, is when the inside of a nuclear reactor gets so hot that it causes the fuel to melt. This can lead to dangerous situations where harmful radiation might be released, or in Godzilla's case, explode and die. Why did this happen to the G-Man? Well, let's say his body anatomy wasn't quite ready to handle this much energy yet.
Godzilla's radiation's reaching critical mass! 6 minutes until he blows!
There was one temporary solution to this, however. Through some supernatural phenomenon during her death, Mothra was capable of passing down certain biological properties that helped Godzilla regulate this temperature for a longer time, allowing Godzilla to reach near meltdown levels, but also to cool down during thermonuclear pulses, explaining why we see Mothra's wing pattern every time Godzilla expels one of these blasts. These not only served as an adequate weapon to finally kill Ghidorah, but also as an important means to cool down Godzilla. Using 3 powerful pulses, Godzilla was finally able to cool down to more manageable levels. Many confuse this thermonuclear form with a state that Godzilla can reach at will, but no, reaching this state is actually pretty dangerous for the G-Man and those around him. After Serizawa's sacrifice, Godzilla had gained more mass during his recovery, recharged him with energy, and prepared him for his next task, establishing order around the planet. It would be a few years until we see Godzilla's next evolutionary phase, but shortly after King of the Monsters, Godzilla would find time to properly break in his new improved suit, fighting all sorts of titans on both land and sea, and over time becoming more agile. During the events of the graphic novel Godzilla Dominion, we see Godzilla's upper body strength drastically improve, capable of throwing titans around like ragdolls, swimming faster, and subjugating other kaijus in a short amount of time. Even going as far as seeking a rematch against the great ape that kicked him out of his house a long time ago, instead coming across and barely defeating the titan Tiamat, a stronger foe. Come the events of 2024 during Godzilla vs. Kong, we witness Godzilla using his upper body strength on Kong, admittedly facing the strongest ape he's ever faced. In this film, we only see a Godzilla who was now used to performing more agile maneuvers. That's as far as his development goes at this point in time. The next stages of evolution will unlock a level that no Titan has ever reached before. 3 years later, after Kong and Godzilla parted ways, Godzilla proved that his fighting skills remained sharp. After easily killing an already charged up Scylla, Godzilla adopted her strategy of absorbing radiation by performing mini raids on nuclear power plants and absorbing radiation and powering up at alarming speeds. This, however, would bring back a problem that he faced in 2019. Remember how his body at this point in time is not capable of storing this much energy. He had pretty much reached a ceiling that could not be surpassed without getting once again near a nuclear meltdown. This irradiated Godzilla would now glow blue, expelling harmful levels of radiation and heat. In one instance in France, Godzilla once again used a pulse to fend off aircraft that were firing missiles at him. But this time it was more than just a pulse. This, ladies and gents, was an EMP. And this comes straight from the official novelization. In the real world, nuclear explosions can also serve as EMPs as well. An EMP is a burst of electromagnetic radiation that can also occur when a nuclear explosion happens near the Earth's surface or at high altitudes, like 393 feet tall kaiju, for example. These then produce damaging current and voltage surges. New ability unlocked. EMPs are now added to the tally of abilities that Godzilla can wield. But this makes Godzilla realize he needs to solve another problem: energy capacity. If he was to fight a world-ender kaiju like Shimo, the G-Man needed to be able to wield more power safely. The answer would be found in the northmost parts of the planet, the Arctic. In the Monsterverse, the Arctic regions of planet Earth serve as a reservoir housing the largest stockpile of energy in planet Earth, courtesy of the constant bombardment of electromagnetic solar winds. This energy would build up here, taking the form as violet or magenta glowing matter. But Tiamat settled here first. Remember how Tiamat in Godzilla Dominion lost against the G-Man? Well, after that, she decided to settle here. After Godzilla got a whiff of this, he immediately decided that Tiamat was too dangerous to leave alive at this point, and that this destroyer kaiju needed to die right here. But Godzilla was first actually after this energy. After dispatching Tiamat in a rather brutal fashion, Godzilla settled in the icy caves that used to house Tiamat. It was here where the G-Man would go through his fastest and most powerful evolution yet. So, what exactly happened here? Upon waking up, Godzilla would immediately be noticeably different. The book mentions that Godzilla did not only absorb this new energy, but also went as far as absorbing some of Tiamat's biological makeup, possibly her DNA. This is reflected by Godzilla's more spiky appearance, Thagomizer on its tail, elbow spikes, and leaner build, especially around the waist. Godzilla's dorsal plates, again an indicator of his evolutionary stage, were also going to be different. Translucent this time, glowing in the violet magenta coloration as well. But Godzilla's appearance now was not the most important part of this new evolution. It was his new molecular density. Why is this important? Molecular density basically refers to the amount of molecules that take up a specific area. If an area, for example, is full of atomic energy storing elements, then we can store more power. Now it's all coming together. Godzilla literally evolved to be able to store more radiation, 20 times more. Now, there's a common misconception that this means 20 times more powerful. There's actually a big difference. Godzilla's new evolution made him capable of storing more energy this time, not energy that's 20 times as powerful. But this Godzilla was certainly stronger, and capable of better firepower this time. Being a higher molecular density in this case should suggest that Godzilla would have been heavier. At least he should. This is not confirmed. So, what is the end result? Now Godzilla won't have to worry about going through a nuclear meltdown anymore. He can now contain much more energy. And this time he can actually reach a state similar to a supercharged state at will, producing energy and atomic blasts that can cut through millions of tons of pyramid stone like it was paper, hurling world-ending kaijus like Shimo for very, very long distances, and most notably, ending an entire world-ending event like an ice age with just one blast. One may say, well, this guy is now too powerful, and this is a valid point. At this level, there are very few things that can stand up to the G-Man that we know of right now. So now this begs the question, have we seen the end of Godzilla's evolution? The answer, very likely not. Or how else are these guys gonna keep selling figures and toys? Just kidding. Besides that, the evolution of Godzilla has revealed the fact that the G-Man is capable of using just about any source of energy to better suit his and the planet's needs. Who knows what other sources of energy there are around the planet, and what type of energy can be found in the hollow Earth. It's possible that if Godzilla doesn't come back to replenish this pink energy after a while, then it may begin to wear off, causing his coloration to slowly but surely return to his classic blue form while maintaining his more scaly and sharp features. His molecular density, however, might actually be here to stay, turning him into a vessel that can contain many types of energy. The number one trait that allowed the G-Man to live this long is his capability to adapt and evolve fast. Having said this, we haven't seen the last of Godzilla's evolution, and he may actually become even stronger against the ultimate threat.